Welcome back to live coverage of the fourth and final round of our last chance qualifier for the Lost Boys Lorcana Invitational starting tomorrow. We have 12 of Magic the Gathering's biggest names. We have Nathan Stoyer, Mason Esports Clark. We have those players that are locked in, and we got a couple players playing in this event looking to score 2 seats. We have 1 round left. Matt, why don't you tell us what the 2 competitors are going to be playing and yeah, you got it. I
All
messed up.
right. We've seen him a couple rounds now. We're gonna have Kurt Spice playing Amber Steel up against Christopher Kemple playing Amber Sapphire.
So Amber Sapphire. So that's going to be like a hyper aggressive strategy.
Well, I don't know about hyper, but there is a lot of lore on these characters. You're gonna have some ramp elements, getting extra ink, and then big characters like Stitch Carefree Surfer and Hades Infernal Schemer.
All right. Well, we are going to be cutting to top 4 after this round, and we're going to have that top 4 playing it out for those 2 slots, 1 match to see who takes it down. But first, we got to find those top 4 competitors. We have a couple of 3-0 players that we'll discuss later, but they have drawn in and they are essentially locked for that top 4 slot. And now we're going to go down to the feature match area where we have 3 matches vying for those last 2 coveted positions. We're going to watch Kurt Spy, see if he can be number 3 to lock up his slot at 301 if he wins this match. Chris Kimple on your right, if he wins, will be 3-1 and likely in, but we'll see. No play here for turn 1 on Chris Kimple's side of things. See if Kurt wants to deploy that hook. He does. Back Kimple's way. This Amber Sapphire versus Amber Steel matchup. This is... Oh, it's Amber Sapphire. I thought you said Amber Amethyst. That's my apologies.
I see.
All right. Tell us about this Amber Sapphire deck a little bit while we're just positioning early.
Yeah, so this has been kind of one of the breakouts of tonight. This weekend we saw 3 players on a team playing Amber Sapphire. It's really rising in metagame share, and Mickey Mouse Detective being a way to accelerate to your Stitch Carefree Surfers earlier is a big focus of that. We're seeing both Amber Steel and Amber Sapphire really focusing on that Surfer. And then, Let It Go and Hades being pretty good interactive cards to back them up. But in this matchup in particular, last round we saw Kurt really mess up Jeebus with a bunch of grab your swords, even against the higher willpower characters.
All right. Well, huge deployment from Kurt Spies over the first 2 turns. Plays 3 1-drop, 2 hook, and a Stitch New Dog, preparing for an onslaught. Chris Kimple, excuse me, plays Simba Bodyguard into Aerial Spectacular Singer, Digging Force Song. And now we'll see what Kurt can deploy on 3.
And this Aerial is really the best follow-up to these early threats, right? You're threatening to be able to sing Grab Your Sword or A Whole New World at the earliest convenience, and these Captain Hooks have really made it so that Chris is not going to be able to kind of take over the game early on, meaning we're going to get into the mid game where Amber Steel can start using its tools.
Yeah, one thing I like about the way Kurt's playing is normally you don't want to just spray the board with 1s, right? Because if you do, you're often vulnerable to opposing 2-drops, grab your sword, sweeper effects. You're just walking into that. And you want to use a lot of those as ink so that you can play larger and larger things. But the way that this Amber Steel deck is constructed, it tries to empty its hand as quickly as possible so that it can deploy a whole new world. And I think that that's what Kurt is about to do.
Right. We've seen when Kurt puts his mind to it, he can get that hand empty real fast. As we just saw, Tinkerbell Giant Fairy right in the ink. We don't want to discard that to grab to a whole new world. And here we go with a fresh grip of 7 for both players. But Chris being on the front foot meant that he really got the best of it.
Yeah, deploys a lantern here for more resource generation on the following turn, more ink. If he has a 1-drop, he can play it now. If not, then he'll be content to pass the turn. No challenging because there's nothing to challenge, and no questing because you don't want to open yourself up. Back Chris Kimple's way. We'll see what he wants to deploy with this fresh 7 plus the draw for turn. A lot of choices, but his deck is not clunky, but it is more mid-range, and that means your cards on average, costs more, and that means that you're unable to exploit the extra resources that your opponent creates from a whole new world.
Right, and that's really going to be. I want to focus on the way Kurt is going to play these next few turns because, like you said, Chris is not going to be able to uh, dump these cards out of his hand very quickly, and the fact that Kurt has a second whole new world means that I expect the way that he's been playing is he's going to get rid of these cards in hand very fast, maybe take one turn off to play multiple cards in a turn, and then the following turn empty completely down to 0, play another whole new world, and Chris will likely still have 4, maybe 5 cards in hand at that point.
All right, well, we decide to send 2 characters to eat the Simba, and then we use Rapunzel to refresh the Simba and draw 2 cards. And now we have the ability to sing with the Ariel if we want to. We could sing Let It Go and take out one of these opposing characters like the Ariel Singer. And that's what we're going to do. It does give Kurt an extra ink to use next turn, but prevents him from singing one of those powerful 5-drop songs, including Grab Your Sword.
Right. This is still just kind of playing right into Kurt's game plan, though. He's going to have this extra ink, both from the Lantern and from the Let It Go, to be able to get cards into play, starting with this Stitch Rockstar. Now, actually, here's the point where we might see Kurt shift his game plan. Being able to deploy a Stitch Rockstar means he can keep his hand full while deploying to the battlefield, meaning it might be a while before we even see this whole new world, if at all.
Yeah, from my experience, you play a whole new world when you're empty and your opponent's not, or if you're in desperation mode. And when you have Stitch Rockstar active, there's no need. I would expect him to discard it here because he's going to be so ahead. And if he doesn't, that just means he's creating contingency plans for if his opponent kills the Rockstar,
Right.
and he's able to empty in the next 2 turns and then fire it off again.
And then, yeah, drawing the card off the Rockstar.
Yep, sequencing so he loots first and then draws off Rockstar. I know that that's how it's structured on Pixelborn, but I think that you're technically allowed to choose the order in which those go
Mm-hmm.
on the stack. And we're going to finish it up with a new dog, draw one more card. Hooks here can challenge in. We can trade with Simba and then eat the Mickey. I think that that's reasonable, but we can also trade with Simba and then trade with the Ariel to make sure that no songs are played for cheap.
Yeah, and I certainly expect this Stitch Rockstar to quest here. It's not being threatened through challenging, but Kurt can pretty reasonably expect it to be answered with a Hades or a Let It Go anyway.
Right.
Just get that lore in while we can. But,
No,
oh,
we're going to wheel again.
wow.
Draw 7. Hand was full, but the hand was gummy, so going to go ahead and toss it back. Going to give Chris Kemperl a fresh 7, but his hand was already full anyway. So it's more of +2 cards for me, +0 cards for you.
Yeah, the fact that this is that, a whole new world is a song means these players are able to get creative like this. This is the second time now we've seen Kurt make this play where his opponent, he and his opponent both have a lot of cards in hand, but he just knows this is. I don't know if this is going to improve my opponent's hand, but it's definitely going to improve mine, and it's not going to cost me any ink to do so. I'm just going to take this free exert with my Rockstar, sing a whole new world, and improve my hand at least a little bit.
All right, players here are thumbing their sideboard and trying to figure out, or thumbing through their discard pile and figuring out what's left in the deck. They've gone through so many with multiple draw 7s and discards, as well as other card advantage spells. And Chris Kemple here, taking a look at a hand that looks a little expensive. We'll see if he's able to deploy anything to play defense.
There's multiple Mickey Mouse detectives, and if you're ever going to play those, you kind of want it to be now, right? So you can utilize that extra ink in the future.
Mm-hmm.
But taking a turn off to deploy a few Mickey Mouses is not really catching you up on board. So instead, we see Maleficent Uninvited and Phil to get some meaningful board presence down. And it's back Kurt's way. Kurt with plenty of options now, including at least one Tinkerbell Giant Fairy. And this Stitch Rockstar got to survive through the turn, which
Imagine.
I don't think Kurt was banking on that, right?
That's probably why he drew 7. He's just like, this
Yeah,
has got to be dead. And maybe if he didn't draw 7, it would have died. And maybe there were tons of answers that were discarded, and Kurt's just super happy.
right.
All right, we're going to start off with Simba. Draw a card.
And this is a kind of a great matchup for Rockstar, especially if you can get it to survive a turn like this, because Amber Sapphire is for the most part, going to have to use challenges to take care of these 1-drops that all drew you a card. They're not going to be able to efficiently clean it up with a sweeper like Grab Your Sword. Speaking of which,
Yeah, that's bad news for Kimple, and I think this game is about over. You know when Simba challenges something, survives,
yeah,
and, the game's probably over if it's challenging and surviving.
absolutely. And there's only so much this Maleficent's going to be able to do on its own.
All right.
Uh,
Be Our Guest is the final play for Kurt unless he finds a 1-drop. If he does find a 1-drop, he can play it and trigger the Stitch Rockstar again. Finds Carefree Surfer. A nice play for next turn, but you don't really need more cards. He has so many already.
and the best part for Kurt here is your Rockstar already went unanswered for a turn, and now if you're able to take care of the threats on the other side, as well as this Grab Your Sword did, you can be reasonably certain it's not going to be answered this turn either.
All right. Well, Chris Kimball's seen enough. Not a whole lot of lore was generated that game, but I tell you what, a board was dominated and Stitch
Right.
blitz from Kurt Spies, looking like butter, and he is 2-0-1 and up a game. And if he wins one more game, he'll be on to the top 4.
Right. Looking at taking a look at Chris's build of Amber Sapphire here, in kind of the flex slots, we see 4 copies of You Have Forgotten Me and 3 copies of Eye of the Fates. We did see at least last round a very good You Have Forgotten Me be cast, but we've seen it inked and seen it played less effectively, just as many times. Also, a couple copies of Part of Your World is some extra value for Ariel to grab. Though that one is, of course, a slightly less efficient song than the standbys in these decks.
As the players are shuffling up here for game number 2, I'd like to take this time to thank our sponsors for the Lost Boys Invitational starting tomorrow. We are currently in the last chance qualifier, giving away 2 slots to that event, where we'll have 16 players tomorrow and Sunday battling for their fair share of $5,000 cash and prizes. I'd like to say a big thank you to Cards and Castles 2, a free-to-play Steam game that's essentially Final Fantasy Tactics meets Hearthstone meets something else.
Awesome.
It's a very cool, like, tower defense-y tactics battler card game. And the cards you draw off the top of your deck, you can play through the resource system where you start with 1 gold, you go up to 10 gold, yada yada. Very simple to learn, but incredibly complex overall. Also, shout out to TCGplayer.com for being our flagship sponsor. They've given us the majority of the prize pool here for the event, and we couldn't have done it without them, so thank you so much. And I'd also like to say thank you to Ultimate Guard for giving us some awesome prizes. Match is underway, and we are going to head on down to the feature match area and watch. We got Stitch, New Dog on your right from Chris Kimple, a 1-drop. And then we're going to go Kurt's follows it up with a Captain Hook Forceful Duelist. We'll see if he's interested in trading next turn. My guess is yes.
Yeah, you can be pretty sure that actually, I don't know. Do we see any rock stars? There are no rock stars in Chris Kemple's deck, and if Kurt is aware of that, he might not be too concerned about this Stitch New Dog, and just looking to get some better challenge value out of the Captain Hook several turns down the line.
All right, we're going to play a BR Guest on turn 2, so not applying any additional pressure, maybe looking to take over later in the game in that control role, deciding not to challenge with the Captain Hook, maybe saving that for a different, more powerful character. He knows there's no Grab Your Sword, right? Because
Right.
it's Sapphire instead of Steel. And so that hook is mostly safe. They're not going to play a 5-cost removal spell on it unless
And
we're
if they
in
do,
dire
you're
straits.
happy. Yeah.
Right. And so we're just saving it to trade up for something that has 3 willpower.
And Kurt knows that in this matchup, the games are not really about the early lore. You know that the games are going to get to the point where the board is super gummed up, and you're going to be able to use this Captain Hook Forceful Duelist to really punch above its weight, and he can be comfortable saving it for that moment.
Yeah, I think that's all fair. Here's Ariel. We're gonna find a whole new world. We're gonna look to maybe sing that or grab your sword in the next few turns. Not trading with that hook does leave more stuff on your opponent's side of the table, so that grab your sword is brutal, but doesn't have it. Decides to just go ahead and trade -1 lore if he had traded with last turn, but has a lot more information this turn. You know,
That's true. When you find yourself in these situations where, taking a trade that was available to you earlier in the game, you do kind of want to take that opportunity to examine the earlier decisions. And a lot of the time you will find, it was right later, but it wasn't right earlier.
there are two versions in the tournament right now of Amber Sapphire. One of which I believe Kurt had played against earlier against Jeebus. Jeebus had Rockstar,
True.
and if Kimple doesn't have Rockstar, that Kurt doesn't necessarily know that, and was afraid of us shifted Rockstar that turn, and that's why he decided to finally trade with the new dog. But I think it's a lot of back and forth. You have to make a decision at some point. Like, do I want to prevent this thing from happening, or do I want to hope it doesn't happen?
Yeah.
And
There's
he
a lot of
decided to
factors.
try to prevent it by trading.
Yeah. One clue you can look at is
He left it
maybe
vulnerable.
exactly.
Yeah.
Or there were a couple draw steps for Kurt there. The texture of his hand can change to the point where he feels like the stitch might end up being a problem.
Okay, well, Kimble gonna play another aerial and then decides to quest and sing instead of singing Let It Go. And now we're gonna go back Kurt's way. Has the ability to sing with aerial, so could potentially deploy a bunch of cards from hand, sing a song, draw 7. But my guess, we're gonna wait a few turns because our hand is pretty mid.
Yeah, I'm not sure. So Kurt has 3 copies of Grab Your Sword, and past couple of rounds we've seen him put that card to very effective use. So if possible, I wonder if he's going to try to save those. But no, sees a great opportunity to just get some characters down, unclutter this hand.
Oh yeah, that hand was not good, and the way that the game was going, Kemple likely going to play a bunch of stuff over the next few turns that's not vulnerable to grab your sword. And so Kurt sees, hey, this is a prime opportunity. We're going to get the Let It Go out of your hand that we know you have from the aerials, so maybe a future Carefree Surfer or Rockstar is safe. And also, I'm going to turn these 3 relatively dead Grab Your Swords into 7 fresh, and your 6-card hand is now a 7-card hand. Congratulations.
Yeah. There's Carefree Surfer, You Have Forgotten Me in Chris's hand. Not a super threatening board on either side. These aerials with Singer 5 in Amber Sapphire really only let it go that you're looking to sing with much efficiency as compared to Amber Steel.
All right, 2 aerials going to gang up, smash this other one? No, we're going to quest up to 5. Don't want to put 2 damage on both your aerials because then an AoE effect like Grab Your Sword or Tinkerbell, Giant Fairy just squishes them.
Speaking of Tinkerbell, though,
here
that's a pretty risky quest into an active Tinkerbell Tiny Tactician.
Oh, here she come.
Exactly. I see a Tink and I see a Lantern. Would not be surprised to see both of those come down this turn.
Yeah, a little resource development, essentially making Lantern only cost 1, inking something like Simba Bodyguard or some other cheap character that you're not going to need for a little while or is relatively weak as the game progresses. And then shifting Tink, dealing 1 to both, attacking 1, dealing 2 to the other, cleaning up both aerials for half a Tinkerbell.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Extra Tink down.
I'm in danger. Maybe it's not time. The way that Kemple has been questing is very carefree.
Yes, I would agree.
And maybe you can get some more value,
And
oh, I like this actually. We're not attacking even with the Tinkerbell because we don't want to put any damage on it and let it get traded for. So we're gonna quest with it. I like it.
I don't know. That surprises me a little. I think a wide board continues to have value if you're in Kurt's position playing against Amber Sapphire.
Yes, but this forces him to play Let It Go or Hades to deal with it and gives you 2 ink.
Fair enough.
All right, we're going to go digging through the discard pile to see what's left in the deck, maybe in the hand, get some more info. See what Kimball wants to do. Has access to ink number 6 this turn. Perhaps 5-drop plus a 1-drop. Perhaps, lantern plus another thing. We'll see what he's got. Chat, how you doing tonight? I haven't been able to look at chat too much. I hope y'all are enjoying this. This has been a lot of fun. These games have been quite good.
Yeah. Great to get more looks at this Amber Sapphire deck. We as we get ready for our invitational tomorrow, we did see a team of Harlan Fear, Brennan DeCandio, and Mason Clark ended up on Amber Sapphire.
Yeah, but as far as I know, they're not playing any lanterns, and I think that that's the biggest difference between the one that Jeebus is playing and that they're playing. See how they do tomorrow.
Yeah, we'll be talking about their lists a little more tomorrow, but they're much less emphasis on cards like Phil, and their team opted for more high willpower characters to try to stick around through Grab Your Sword and Tinkerbell. All right,
here's...
Whoa!
You just play to draw 7. I'm going to play out some junk.
All right.
The
A great reason to make this play, we saw that Whole New World discard 3 copies of Grab Your Sword.
Yeah.
And one interesting part, the aerial was vulnerable for Kurt. Challenging it for Chris would leave this Maleficent, vulnerable to the Tink Giant Fairy. So Chris just decides, if that's going to happen, I'm more happy to get 3 lore out of it. And let my opponent do the challenging for me.
Right. So we don't get to talk much about or play much limited yet. But from my experience playing with starter decks and playing like some random pack battles and things like that, what ends up happening a lot more often than not is you want to force your opponent to be the one that challenges you.
Yes.
And that gets punished significantly by the ultra rares like Tinkerbell, Giant Fairy, Aladdin, Heroic Outlaw, Maleficent. Wait, which Maleficent?
Monstrous Dragon?
How's that punish questing? I forgot what I was talking about. Anyway. Back to the game. We're going to go Tinkerbell squishes and kills Phil Sadie's. 2 damage left on it. We're going to heal it. Draw 3. Chris Kemple in a bad way.
If you challenge your opponent's thing, they lose their thing. If you just quest with yours and then Maleficent takes it down, you didn't get any value out of your character. Anyway.
Right. Anyway, my point is that you should always be looking for spots to quest instead of challenging, because questing pushes towards a victory condition, and if your questing forces your opponent to make the opposite attack that you would make, then you are winning.
Yeah. Absolutely agree.
It gets really complex as the pieces get more complex, right? As the decks change and get better.
Yeah. If you're increased the seat, Kurt has at least copies of Smash, if not other removal in his deck.
All right, Carefree Surfer comes down for Kimball, draws 2. We have 2 Stitch New Dogs and a Simba Bodyguard, which can rumble. We can send 2 of them into the Simba to knock it off, but I think we should just quest for 3 or do nothing. I think attacking a bunch into my opponent's Simba seems like a nightmare.
Yeah, for
Double
sure.
trade into it actually seems reasonable, though. Okay. For me, if I'm Kurt, if we go to game 3, that essentially confirms that there's no Rockstar on the other side. If your opponent's willing to make that trade specifically.
Yeah.
But, just little things you can pick up. Just how your opponent plays, how they value their things.
Now, looking at Kurt's hand here, I'm, without seeing, all the cards very clearly, I'm not too sad about just jamming Carefree Surfers, this turn, next turn, turn after that if possible.
Yeah. When does it become bad to play a Carefree Surfer? I had a long talk on the drive up with my boy Frank Carson, Magic Hall of Famer. He's been staying with me for a week and leading up to the Invitational, and he's playing 2 copies of Carefree Surfer in his Stitch Blitz deck, but he's only playing 1 Lantern. And I was giving him some guff about it because we kept playtesting and we would never get to 7 ink. Never.
Sure.
and it would often be our fifth or sixth ink.
Yeah, yeah.
But the builds with Lantern and the way that Kurt's been playing, I actually am really digging the Carefree Surfers in his deck. I really like how he's playing. I like how he's constructed his deck with all those one cost Simbas that help you loot.
Hmm.
Overall, I think Kurt's build is probably my favorite in the event.
Yeah, it's very impressive. And you know, Simba, as you mentioned, part of its role is to loot away those extra whole new worlds. But I think we've seen that maybe once out of Kurt, and that's because he's very good at setting up situations where he's happy to cast a whole new world. It's either giving him an enormous advantage or a small advantage that's consistent. But he's able to engineer those board states.
All right, Hades comes down, eats Tinkerbell Giant Fairy, and then we quest 4-3 up to 11 is Chris Kimple. So Kurt needs to do a little bit of interacting here if he wants to win the race. Currently, I think he's losing, but not by a lot. And could just play another Carefree Surfer here and try to set up again for a bigger next turn. But that leaves him vulnerable to getting challenged quite a bit. Or not, quested against quite a bit.
And one of the merits of Chris's play a couple turns ago, where he sent the two Stitch and New Dogs into the Simba, is he knows at some point Kurt might draw that fourth copy of Grab Your Sword, and I'd rather get rid of these Stitches earlier than later.
All right, we got a big turn from Kurt. We go Tinkerbell Giant Fairy, deal one to everything, and then we sing Grab Your Sword with Stitch Carefree Surfer. Then we send two characters into the Carefree Surfer to knock it off and smash. A full board clear and Chris Kimple in shambles. We're going to quest for two with the Rapunzel and back Chris Kimple's way. Can he get out of this? It's looking bad. We find Carefree Surfer. We found the spot you don't want to draw it, and that's when you have no other characters on the table.
That's true. And one of the quote unquote weaknesses of Amber Steel is a lack of hard spot removal, but Kurt has been able to play around that really well by utilizing Grab Your Sword and then, lining up smashes and other characters just right so that he uses as few resources as possible to deal with a bunch of characters all at once.
Right. Yeah, the way that you jockey for position in the early turns with Amber decks and other very creature rush heavy decks. Oh, he just packs in Chris Kimple, not even going to draw a card off the Robin Hood. And Curse Beast takes it down 2-0, and he is likely your third player into the top four, and he'll be fighting for one of those two coveted spots into the Invitational after our final round of Swiss.